The Vatican, October 30th, 1503. You're standing in the Apostolic Palace beneath ceilings that stretch toward heaven itself. Frescoes of angels and saints staring down with painted eyes that seem, for the first time in their existence, to be looking away. The air is thick, wine-soaked, heavy with something you can't name but feel in your chest like a stone. 50 women crawl across the marble floor, naked, trembling, not in some forgotten corner of Rome's underbelly, not in a pagan temple buried by time, but here, in the heart of Christendom, in the home of the man who claims to speak for God. Their knees scrape against cold stone. Their breath comes in short, terrified gasps. Cardinals line the walls in scarlet robes that catch the candlelight like pools of fresh blood. Some cross themselves so frantically their hands blur. Others turn their faces away, but their feet stay planted because the doors are locked. Guards stand ready, hands resting on sword hilts, eyes forward. No one leaves, no one speaks. And at the center of it all, elevated on a throne gilded in gold that glows like molten sin, sits Pope Alexander VI, the Holy Father, God's representative on earth. He's smiling, laughing even, leaning forward with the enthusiasm of a man watching a particularly thrilling horse race. He points, makes a joke, places a bet with the man beside him, his son, Cesare Borgia, whose face remains as cold and expressionless as marble. But this is only the opening act. What follows will be so depraved, so violently opposed to every sacred word ever spoken within these walls, that Jan Burchard, the Vatican's master of ceremonies, a man who has witnessed years of scandal, will sit in his chamber afterward with trembling hands, knowing that what he's about to write might be the most damning testimony ever penned against the Church. This is the story of a wedding night that became a nightmare. A night when two innocent people were destroyed to satisfy the twisted appetites of the most powerful family in Italy. A night when the Vatican itself became a theater of hell. The question you should be asking isn't how this happened. The question is, who was forced to suffer through it? And more importantly, why did everyone just stand there and watch? Look, if you're drawn to the documented records that textbooks conveniently forget, if you want to understand the real darkness that shaped our world, then subscribing to Crimson Historians helps us continue digging into archives and uncovering accounts that powerful institutions spent centuries trying to bury. We don't just tell stories, we exhume them. Now, back to that wedding night. Her name was Lucretia Borgia. By 1503, that name alone was enough to make noblemen cross themselves. Europe whispered it like a curse. Poisoner, seductress, the Pope's daughter who moved through marriages the way other women changed gowns, leaving corpses behind each time. But those who actually knew her, the servants who dressed her in the mornings, the attendants who sat with her through long, silent nights, they saw something different. They saw a 21-year-old woman with eyes far older than her face, a woman who woke screaming, clawing at her chest, reliving horrors she refused to name, a woman who wasn't the monster, she was the prey. Her first husband, Giovanni Sforza, had fled Rome in the dead of night, claiming assassins were hunting him. He wasn't paranoid, he was right. The marriage was annulled the moment it stopped serving her father's ambitions. Giovanni lived, but only because he ran fast enough. Her second husband, Alonso of Aragon, wasn't so lucky. She was 19 when it happened. 19 and in love. Real love. The kind that made her smile again. The kind that made her believe she could survive this family. Ches Borgia, her brother, had other plans. Alonso was strangled on the steps of the Vatican. The assassins made sure Lucretia heard it, made sure his final screams echoed through the corridors so she would understand. Love was a weakness the Borgias could not afford. And now, in the autumn of 1503, came the announcement that made all of Italy hold its breath. Lucretia Borgia would marry again. This time, the groom was Alonso d'Este, heir to the powerful Duchy of Ferrara, a young prince raised on concepts like honor, duty, nobility, a man who believed his name, his lineage, his ancient bloodline meant something. He tried to refuse, sent diplomats with carefully worded excuses, begged his father to find another alliance, any other alliance, offered bribes, trade agreements, military support, anything to avoid this marriage. But you didn't say no to Alexander VI. The message that arrived in Ferrara was delivered by a cardinal with sweat staining his collar despite the winter cold. He spoke quietly, but every word landed like a blade. Accept this marriage, or we will erase your family from history. It wasn't an exaggeration. Cesare's armies could obliterate Ferrara within weeks. Excommunication would strip the d'Este family of legitimacy, turning allies into enemies overnight. Their dynasty, centuries old, would become a footnote. So, Alonso d'Este packed his belongings, kissed his mother goodbye, and rode toward Rome like a condemned man walking to the gallows. What he didn't know, what even Lucretia didn't fully understand, was that this wedding wasn't about politics. It wasn't about alliances or trade routes or military strategy. It was about breaking them both. It was about showing every noble family in Italy what happened when you thought your name, your lineage, your ancient bloodline meant something. The Borgias were about to prove that nothing was sacred when power wanted to make a point. And if this story doesn't make you pause and realize how easily human dignity can be shattered by those who hold the reins, then you're not paying attention to the lesson that echoes from 1503 straight into our present day. Because this isn't ancient history, this is a mirror. December 1503, Alonso d'Este enters Rome. The journey has been brutal. Frozen mountain passes, roads turned to mud, nights spent in taverns where locals go silent when his name is mentioned. But nothing prepared him for the sight of the Vatican itself. It rises before him like a stone colossus, half cathedral, half fortress. Even from a distance, it doesn't look like the home of God. It looks like a predator's den. Inside, the welcome is overwhelming. Alexander VI sits enthroned in white and gold that catches the candlelight like molten metal. His face is flushed, jovial, delighted. He spreads his arms wide. "Welcome, my son. Welcome to Rome." Beside him stands Cesare Borgia, 26 years old, silent, motionless, already the most feared man in Italy. When Cesare's eyes lock onto Alonso, the message is unmistakable. You belong to us now. What follows are slow humiliation disguised as celebration. At banquets, Alonso is seated beside courtesans, while clergy watch with barely concealed amusement. On hunting trips, Cesare displays his skill with alarming precision. Every crossbow bolt finds its mark. Every kill feels less like sport and more like a demonstration.
At receptions, Alexander makes jokes about Lucrezia's previous husbands. Such tragic luck, 2 husbands dead before their time. Let's hope the 3rd time is the charm. Yes. The court laughs. Alfonso sits frozen. At night he's kept in isolated chambers, watched constantly by papal guards. He asks to send letters home. They're intercepted. He tries to arrange a quiet departure. The guards inform him that would be unwise. He is a prisoner, a prop in someone else's play. Meanwhile, Lucrezia watches from her apartments. She knows something is wrong. Her maids whisper about strange preparations, unfamiliar women being led through hidden passages. Cesare moving through the palace with that particular smile that makes servants cross themselves. But no one will give her straight answers. The night before the wedding, she can't bear it anymore. She flees to the Sistine Chapel. Beneath Michelangelo's vast ceiling, beneath God's hand reaching toward Adam, Lucrezia Borgia collapses to her knees. She doesn't pray for love. She doesn't pray for happiness. She prays for escape. Please, please don't let this happen. The chapel remains silent. When she finally stands and walks back toward her chambers, her face is blank, empty. She understands now. No one is coming to save her, because while she was praying, Cesare and Alexander were finalizing the details. 50 courtesans, educated, refined women who frequented Roman salons, had been hand-selected and brought into secret chambers beneath the palace. Many wept when they learned what the Pope expected of them, but none dared refuse the head of Christendom. They were told to dress in their finest silks and velvets. They were told they would be part of the wedding celebration. They were not told they would be ordered to remove every layer. They were escorted through hidden passageways by lantern light, kept separated so they couldn't build courage through solidarity. Servants who witnessed these preparations made the sign of the cross so many times their hands cramped. They whispered prayers that clung to their lips like frost. They knew something unholy was rising within the Vatican's walls. And Jan Burchard, the master of ceremonies, sat in his chamber reviewing the protocol for tomorrow. His hand trembled as he dipped his quill into ink. He understood, in a way that made his blood run cold, that what he was about to witness would either be buried forever by the Church or stand as the most damning document in Christian history. The night of October 30th, 1503 was coming, and it would drag even the walls of the Vatican closer to hell. October 30th dawns with bells. They ring across the 7 hills of Rome, calling the faithful to witness a papal wedding. Crowds gather in the streets. Inside the apostolic palace, Lucrezia is prepared by a dozen attendants. Her gown is silk, embroidered with gold thread, glowing like liquid flame. Her hair braided with pearls falling in intricate plaits. Her face powdered pale, masking the exhaustion and fear beneath. When she looks in the mirror, she doesn't see a bride. She sees a sacrifice. The ceremony is held in the papal chapel, a chamber drowning in gilded walls and holy paintings. Alexander VI officiates personally, his voice booming as he binds Alfonso and Lucrezia together before God. Rows of scarlet-clad cardinals stand along the walls, their faces carved into masks of devotion, but behind their eyes flickers something else: dread. After the vows, guests are escorted to the Borgia apartments, halls resplendent with fresco by Pinturicchio, stories of saints and heroes stretching across walls that will soon witness their own perversion.
Tables overflow with roasted boar, pheasants adorned in feathers, exotic fruits, goblets of wine flowing freely. Cardinals, nobles, emissaries from Ferrara, all carefully selected, fill the room. Alonso and Lucrezia sit at the head table, trapped in a celebration that already feels unreal. At first, everything unfolds like any noble feast. Gentle music drifts through the air, toasts offered, hollow compliments exchanged. But as the night deepens, the atmosphere shifts. Alexander VI, flushed from wine, grows louder, more jubilant. Then Cesare, silent until now, slowly rises from his seat. With a subtle tilt of his head, he gives a command. The massive doors slam shut. Guards take positions, hands on sword hilts. No one will leave this room. At Cesare's signal, side doors open. 50 women step into the hall, draped in velvet and jewels, but unable to hide the terror in their eyes. A hush falls over the room, thick as smoke. Alexander VI rises, smiling as if unveiling a masterpiece. My friends, the true entertainment is about to begin. At the Pope's command, the courtesans begin to remove their garments. Silk and velvet slip to the marble floor until they stand completely naked before the assembly. Princes, cardinals, nobles, all frozen in stunned disbelief. A cathedral built for prayer now stares at a scene torn from a blasphemous dream. Cardinals turn away, trembling fingers tracing crosses. Some try to rise, to flee, but the guards shift forward, making it clear no one escapes. Alfonso sits frozen, his face drained of color. Lucrezia begins to cry. Silent tears stream down her face, soaking into her wedding dress. Her hands clenched so tightly, her knuckles turn white. But Alexander is just getting started. He orders servants to bring in baskets of chestnuts and scatter them across the marble floor. The nuts roll between horrified guests, echoing like distant thunder. Then comes the announcement that makes even hardened men flinch. The naked courtesans are to crawl on all fours between the legs of cardinals and nobles to collect the chestnuts like animals. The woman who gathers the most will be rewarded with golden silks. What follows is so extreme that Jan Burchard will later write he struggled to find words. 50 naked women crawl across the sacred Vatican floor, weaving between the robes of church princes, while Alexander and Cesare watch from above. They're laughing, pointing, placing bets like this is cheap entertainment in a brothel, not the beating heart of Christendom. Some young cardinals, drunk and overwhelmed, join the laughter. Others bow their heads, crushed by the war between faith and terror. Alfonso sits motionless, unable to comprehend this is his wedding feast in the Vatican, under the eyes of the man who claims to speak for God. And Lucrezia's wedding dress has become a shroud. Her tears dried into frozen emptiness. She never imagined they would turn her wedding into a ritual of damnation.
The Vatican clocks toll midnight. Alexander raises his hand, silencing the room. The chestnut game is over. Exhausted courtesans huddled in corners. Wine soaks the tables. Guests sit frozen, half drunk, half stunned, entirely broken. But Alexander is clear-headed, focused, intent. His next command silences the hall completely. My friends, the sacred duty of marriage must now be fulfilled. But what he orders next crushes whatever remains of dignity. Alfonso d'Este will consummate this marriage with my daughter, not once, 3 times, and not in private. Every witness present will remain in place to verify the union is sealed irrevocably before both the church and the world. The hall descends into horrified silence. Even Cesare looks sharply at his father, caught off guard by the sheer audacity. Alfonso rises slowly, his face gray as ash. He is surrounded by Cesare's armed men. Their hands grip sword hilts. There is no refusing this command. He turns to Lucrezia. She trembles like a trapped bird, her eyes vacant. Her lips move soundlessly under the murderous gaze of guards and the Pope's expectant stare. Alfonso has no choice. He extends his hand. Lucrezia takes it with fingers cold as death. Together they walk toward an adjoining chamber, a bed, candles, fresh linens, a bridal chamber, but the doors remain wide open, no privacy, no humanity. Those who haven't fled are forced to stand in the outer room in full view of what is about to take place. What follows is not a union, it is the destruction of 2 human beings. Witnesses stare in stunned silence. Some whisper desperate prayers, others cry quietly. Even the courtesans look away in grief. And as the night drags on, as the Pope's horrific decree unfolds, step by agonizing step, a single truth fills the Vatican. Something sacred has died in this palace tonight. If you've stayed with us through this descent, if this moment makes you realize how fragile human dignity is when power loses all restraint, then remember, this isn't fiction. This happened in the heart of the Christian world, under the roof of the man who claimed to represent God on earth, and almost everyone who witnessed it stayed silent. By the time the first pale light of dawn creeps through the windows of the Borgia apartments, Lucrezia has slipped into a state beyond exhaustion, beyond fear. Her mind, desperate to survive, has separated from the nightmare unfolding around her. She moves mechanically, without thought, as if her spirit has fled her body to escape the horror. She can no longer fight. When the ordeal is finally completed, Cesare announces triumphantly that the marriage is now bound 3 times, sealed in the eyes of both the Church and the law. Impossible to challenge, impossible to undo. Alexander VI lifts his wine cup in satisfaction, smiling as if the night had been nothing more than an extravagant celebration. What remains are the broken cardinals who entered draped in scarlet as servants of God, now stand as unwilling witnesses to an atrocity they can never confess. Their silence, their inaction, has made them accomplices. By the time the first pale light of dawn creeps through the windows of the Borgia apartments, it reveals devastation. Empty wine jugs, chestnuts crushed into marble, exhausted courtesans curled in corners, guards standing like statues, eyes downcast. In the adjoining chamber, Lucrezia lies completely still, staring upward as if the ceiling were miles away. Her body remains in the room, but her spirit is elsewhere, somewhere unreachable. Alfonso sits at the edge of the bed, trembling violently, his face buried in his hands. Nothing in his life, no battlefield, no political threat has ever shattered him like this night. Within days, Alfonso leaves Rome quietly, broken beyond repair. He returns to Ferrara, carrying a silence he will hold for the rest of his life. Not once does he ever speak of that night again. But the story cannot be contained. Word of the banquet spreads like plague.
whispers in Roman streets turning into murmurs across Italy, then erupting into reports sent to courts throughout Europe. Ambassadors write encoded letters, priests speak in veiled warnings, nobles read the dispatches in stunned disbelief. The Venetian envoy famously writes, "What happened in the Vatican surpasses even the darkest imaginations of ancient Rome." The Borgias had been feared before, but now they are viewed as the very embodiment of corruption. In marketplaces and taverns, people lower their voices when uttering their name, as if the family itself could hear their whispers. Lucrezia moves to Ferrara and tries desperately to craft a normal life. She funds charities, protects artists, nurtures literature and beauty. But those who see her privately describe the same thing: a lingering sorrow, a quiet melancholy, eyes that have seen too much. She bears children with Alonso, but their marriage, irrevocably poisoned by that night, is a hollow shell. They live side by side, separated by a wound no human could mend. Lucrezia dies young, at 39, giving birth to her 8th child. On her deathbed, she asks for a priest and prays until her final breath. Her last recorded words are, "I am ready to be free at last." Freedom, something she had been denied her entire life. Alexander VI dies only months after the banquet, rumors whispering that poison, the tool he had used so often, finally found its way back to him. Cesare Borgia, stripped of power after his father's death, falls in a lonely ambush in Spain. His body is mutilated and thrown into an unmarked grave, far from the grandeur he believed he was destined for. But the night of October 30th, 1503, does not die with them. That night became a symbol, an icon of corruption so severe that it fueled the flames of the Protestant Reformation. Martin Luther and others invoked the Borgias repeatedly as proof of the Vatican's decay. The Counter-Reformation that followed was in part an attempt to erase the stain of this family from history. Yet the truth survived. Centuries later, Johann Burchard's diary resurfaced, dragging the event back into the light, refusing to let it be forgotten. Even today, more than 500 years after that night, the chestnut banquet and the triple shame stand as infamous reminders of what happens when absolute power loses all restraint. But here's what haunts me most about this story. It's not just that it happened, it's that almost everyone in that room, cardinals, nobles, witnesses, stayed. They watched. They remained silent. They became accomplices through their inaction, because speaking up meant risking everything, their positions, their lives, their families, and so they chose their own safety over the dignity of 2 human beings being destroyed in front of them. This is not simply history. This is a mirror. It warns us that humanity's darkest acts are often committed in the places meant to be most sacred, that evil thrives not just through the actions of monsters, but through the silence of witnesses. Edmund Burke once wrote, "The only thing necessary for the triumph of evil is for good men to do nothing." That night in 1503, in the heart of the Vatican, good men did nothing, and 2